Today's subject: the deep state.
The deep state.
Deep state.
Deep state.
Deep state.
Deep state.
My plan to dismantle the deep state and reclaim our democracy.
Who are they? What do they do? And are they even real? Kind of, sort of, yes. They're not what you think they are, but at the same time, it's exactly what you think it is. Warning, Philip is a professional mind blower. The topics discussed are not for the closed-minded. The term has been used and abused so much in politics and the media lately that it's sort of lost its true meaning. But there kind of is a deep state, and we're gonna expose them for who they really are. As with most things, it all started with good intentions after the bombing of Pearl Harbor in 1941. The Japanese just brought the war to American soil, and obviously the US had to retaliate. Franklin D. Roosevelt, the president at the time, forms a plan of action. So he consults with his good friend, Bill Donovan, a cunning Wall Street lawyer whom FDR deeply trusted. Wild Bill Donovan, as he was known, suggested starting an intelligence agency within the United States, one that would have a centralized source of power. So he was put in charge of America's newest department. You guessed it, the Office of Strategic Services, the OSS, whose job was to gather intel, aka spy, and figure out how to use that information to devise operations that would help them during wartime. And the office was supposed to be dismantled after the war was over, which is what espionage was originally intended for, war. The OSS was by design made to operate above, or should I say under the radar of the law, in order to be able to do what they need to do with no restrictions. Essentially, absolute power for the safety of the country. Wild Bill loved having parties, which he often held to discuss plans and operations within the OSS at his house in Georgetown, a wealthy neighborhood of Washington, D.C. It's at these parties that he would network with, plan operations, and hire new spies for the OSS. Anyway, the OSS did their job, planned a few crazy missions here and there throughout the war, and in 1945, when the war ended, the office was dissolved. At least it was formally dissolved by President Harry Truman, but as you may know, when absolute power is given, it's hard to take it away. When tensions began to rise between America and the Soviet Union in the years following during the Cold War, those original OSS guys had the perfect excuse to come back. To, you know, keep the country safe and beat the Soviets, right? But other lawmakers strongly opposed it, claiming that this much power to a secret underground group is exactly how governments collapse. Power tends to corrupt, and absolute power corrupts absolutely, every time. But President Truman was convinced they needed to do something, and so officially created, now you can say it, the Central Intelligence Agency, the CIA, in 1947, who would spy, gather intelligence, and low-key do whatever they want, all for the purpose of national security. And they really did do whatever the f*** they wanted to, as long as they were able to rationalize it as doing it for some greater good. Operations that were intended to manipulate and fundamentally reshape the trajectory of our societies and the governments of our world. Like MKUltra, where unsuspecting victims were dosed with drugs for experimentation on mind control. Operation Shamrock ushered in the first ever domestic wiretaps, normalizing spying on your own citizens. Operation Chaos, falsely arresting many anti-war activists so the military can do whatever they want. Dozens of confirmed CIA assassination attempts on world government officials. Operation Mockingbird, where journalists were hired as agents of influence, shaping news coverage to align with how the government wanted us to think. COINTELPRO, a series of covert and very illegal projects that ran misinformation campaigns aimed at discrediting groups the government didn't like. The SAC-46, a literal heart attack gun the CIA created, meant to assassinate targets staged as a heart attack with no way to trace it. Several CIA-backed coup attempts in places like Greece, Indonesia, Guatemala, and many others to illegally overthrow leaders they just didn't like, all conducted by agencies like the CIA under the guise of public safety. But these agencies are just hired intelligence officers that just executed the plans. These plans don't just appear out of thin air. There's someone or a body of people who are orchestrating them and giving them to these intelligence agencies to execute. It's said that those wealthy unelected men from those Georgetown parties are the ones who continued orchestrating these operations behind a veil that the public couldn't see. A group of people who can essentially plan whatever operation they want and not face public repercussions from it themselves. There have even been cases of lawmakers getting threatened and blackmailed to ease their scrutiny of these operations so they can keep doing what they want. These ops were clearly starting to get way out of hand, and that's why they were kept as classified operations. No one needed to know about them. But if they ever did get exposed, the public-facing government would be the one facing major backlash, so they started to take note. In 1963, just 1 month after the JFK assassination, former President Truman, the one who established the CIA, submits a letter insisting the CIA should be abolished. And this is coming from the man who authorized the dropping of 2 nukes on Japan, essentially telling us the CIA is becoming a threat to democracy, which started the unraveling. Enter Senator Frank Church, one of the OG whistleblowers of history, who in 1975 started to expose the atrocities the CIA was committing. These hearings confirmed the small group of unelected officials who used government resources to do sketchy, unethical, and outright illegal shit for the past 20 years, all in secret, so no one takes accountability accountability for coming up with any of these operations. And that's exactly what the deep state is. This idea of an organization like the OSS, the CIA, that is able to perform secret activities above the law under the guise of national security sets a precedent. One that continued and created many other three-letter intelligence organizations that all perform on a similar principle. The people working at these organizations are not the deep state. They're just doing their job, but rather the ones devising these plans that are then carried out by these organizations, knowing that they can do anything they want and face no consequences. Plans that manipulate the outcomes of elections, defame political leaders, protect other ones, make up stories about foreign interference. The puppet masters of our entire democracy. After the church hearings, regulatory committees like the US SSCI were formed, whose sole purpose was to tell intelligence agencies like the CIA what they can and can't do. Obviously, the agencies pushed back, but eventually the committee was set into place and oversaw operations to make sure they were within legal and ethical bounds. And so the deep state was mostly dissolved, or at least their ability to do whatever they want was. But if national emergencies like Pearl Harbor or the Cold War was enough to establish agencies like these in the first place, then America just needed a new crisis to bring the deep state back. Oh yes, that 9/11. Once we had a new reason to deem a foreign threat within the country, spies, bureaucrats, and intelligence officers needed emergency powers again to keep the country safe. And new agencies with similar powers were created that can perform these tasks, like the Department of Homeland Security. And guess who were the ones that came up with this idea and all the operations that soon followed? Yup, the deep state is kinda back. Once you give unrestricted power to anyone, they will not give it up, even if it takes decades to take it back. Even Kash Patel, the current director of the FBI, admits there is a deep state of operatives behind the workings of America's intelligence agencies that he's working on weeding out. And that's what they are, a small group of unelected officials who form a permanent government that underlies whoever's currently in power, who do essentially whatever they want, leading operations that literally shape the thoughts of our society and the rest of the world as well, and operate outside the regular workings of government as dictated by the Constitution. We only know about the old operations from 30, 40, 50 plus years ago because enough time has passed that those who led them are no longer around and can now be declassified. And is why they were holding on to the JFK files for so long. Obviously, the more recent ops are still very highly top secret because they're probably still happening right now. But remember, it's just a theory. It could just be well-meaning, good-intentioned people coming up with all these plans, and no one is actually abusing the limitless power they were given.